All right, let's get started. Okay. Okay. This could be a problem. By the time we're done here, we will walk through the process of recovering a password for a Cisco router or switch. Seems like an odd topic to throw right in the middle of building a physical lab environment for the Cisco realm, but it's actually not. Because when you build a Cisco lab environment, you're not going to buy new equipment unless you have a lot of money, and which I would question your motive to get into Cisco in the first place, because you're going to go to the used vendors, the people that go scoop up businesses that fail, take all their equipment and parse it out. That's where you'll get most of your gear from, right? So a lot of the gear that will come to you will come from somebody that has no idea how to work a Cisco switch or a router or anything of the sorts, and you'll get it and it has the previous configuration of the company that they purchased it from or acquired it from or however they got it, right? And I would say you're at the best possible place you can be. I love getting equipment from old companies and you recover the password and then you get to see their configuration, because you always learn something from looking at how other network engineers configured their devices. So the great news about password recovery is that you can do it without completely erasing the device. And I'm going to walk you through that right now. Now, even though I know you're probably just getting started in the realm of Cisco, there is a little prerequisite knowledge needed before we get here. I'm going to assume when you get here that you know what a console connection is and does. I actually created another skill called Connect and Navigate Cisco iOS or Internet Network Operating System. And inside of there are two specific videos. One that walks you through configuring a console connection in Windows, which is what I'm going to be using for this, and another that shows you how to configure a console connection for Mac OS. The other thing that I'm going to assume is that you're using a console cable that has the Prolific chipset. I mentioned that in this skill, but when it comes to password recovery, it's extremely important. I just brought over Windows Device Manager, and if I scroll down here, you'll see that I have ports, right? I expand that out, and I have connected to my computer right now 2 different USB to serial converters. Check it out. One of them is this guy right here, right? Right here. Looks the same, right? Looks kind of like this guy right here, but it's not. It's shinier. But this is actually one that I got for about $4.99 off of I don't even know where. This one, on the other hand, cost me $19. Difference? One uses the Prolific chipset, and the other uses whatever CH340 is. The reason that I emphasize this right now is because this one does not support sending a break signal, which is going to be the key piece that you need to do password recovery over a USB to serial connection. When they created the driver for this guy, they just decided, we're not going to put that in there. And that'll cost you a lot of time, probably more time than the savings of $15 would have cost you if you would have just gone with the Prolific chipset for your USB to serial converter. So before I dive right into the configuration, I'm going to go live with you on the Cisco gear. Here is the general process of password recovery. First thing, connect to the console port, and that's the prerequisite knowledge that I was hoping you would grab from the other skill. Second, reboot the device and send a break signal within the first 30 seconds-ish. And I say ish because different Cisco devices are different. Some of them will allow you to do it a little longer, some of them a little shorter. The key is you're breaking out of the normal boot process to get into a mode known as ROM monitor. ROM-mon is what you'll see in the prompt, which is before it actually boots to the operating system. Think of this as breaking out of your normal Windows boot process to get to a DOS prompt. Once you're into ROM-mon mode, you're going to modify the configuration register. Now, there is a ton that we could say about this. Think of this as the dip switches. You know, like when you're programming a garage door opener, those little tiny dip switches that set the code for how the garage door will open. Think of that as the dip switches for your boot process and some of the core settings of your device. The configuration register sets things like the console port speed, how fast it transmits, and can really mess things up. It sets where the device looks for its startup configuration, where it tries to find all the configuration that it's going to use to operate. And that's what we're going to try and ignore with this password recovery process. You set the configuration register to ignore the configuration, not delete it, just ignore it. Boot the process, recover your old configuration, resets the passwords. I know some of you are like, that sounds like step 4.1 and point 2. Yeah, I kind of was like, let's just jam it all in there. You recover the configuration, meaning you don't want to lose your config. So recover it, reset your passwords, save the new configuration, and then change the configuration register back. I know, a lot of stuff, right? It'll make a lot of sense as I'm actually doing it. So let's go there together. All right, so I've plopped on over to my bank of Cisco equipment, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug the console cable back into that router that we were working on, and I'm going to flip it on. Now, I previously powered this off. Now, while we're waiting for that to boot, you can see I've got my console connection going right here, nothing coming out on the window. You can see it behind me on the television, so when it does something, let me know. This should tell you, this should remind you that if a intruder, if a rogue person has physical access to your Cisco devices, they can get around all your passwords. So hang on, 1 sec. I'm going to hit now Control Break on the keyboard. Oh, click on the screen, quick, Jeremy, quick. My 30 seconds is ticking by. There we go. I hit Control Break. Notice it says monitor command boot aborted due to user interrupts. Now, I want to make sure you guys catch what I'm doing here. On the keyboard, it's literally Control Break. Now, what if your keyboard doesn't have a break command? Well, good news. PuTTY, if you click on this, it actually has a special command menu, which is kind of funny because it's a whole folder for one command, break. This will also send the break message over to your device and break it out of the output. So a lot of times you'll just find yourself clicking. There's no harm in hitting the break 1,000 times, so you can just sit there, tap while your device is booting to make sure that you get it into the ROM monitor mode. So we're there. Now what do we do? Well, keep in mind, ROM monitor is before any operating system has loaded, so it's got very basic functionality. I'm going to hit question mark and hit enter, and it shows all the commands that I can do. These are all primarily recovery commands. Like sometimes the flash will get corrupted on your Cisco device, and you have to do a TFTP download, meaning I can actually re-download an operating system and do an operating system recovery that way. You can also do X modem transfers. There's where you can upload using modem-like commands a new operating system to the device. So all of these are essentially ways to recover your operating system. We're after one command, and that is confreg. That's the configuration register. So watch what happens. I'm going to type in confreg and just hit the enter key. And it comes up and says, do you want to change this configuration? These are the core settings that the configuration register controls. And by the way, this is super important for you to see. 0x2102. I know, it's foreign right now. What's that all about? 0x2102 is the default configuration register, as in no settings are changed. And we could get into a whole bunch of stuff about the configuration register, and I'm biting my tongue because I want to, but I'm not going to. Every one of these numbers does something. Changing that 1 to a 2, for example, changing this 2 to a 4, they all do something that affect the router. I'm not going to go through all that because we could be talking for hours. The main thing I'm going to do right now is type in confreg. Oh, hang on. Confreg 0x2142. You could press confreg and go through the little prompts and say, do you want to change it? Yes, no, and answer all the questions. But when you get down to it, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to change the configuration register to 2142 because I'll give you the meaning of this one thing. Changing from 0 to 4 literally says ignore the startup configuration on this device. And the startup configuration is what holds all the passwords. It's what holds the configuration for the interfaces and essentially all of the things that make your router or switch a router or switch that operates in your network environment. You're ignoring all that, so it's going to boot as if you just pulled it out of the box, but it didn't lose the configuration. Watch. I'm back in ROM on. I'm going to type in reset. And now it's going to boot with the configuration register 2142. I'm going to pause the video, let this go through its boot process, probably about 3 minutes, and I'll come back once it's back to the initial boot screen. Now, I want to remind you of where we are in the process while we're waiting for that thing to boot. We did this. We rebooted the device, sent a break signal, first 30-second. We've modified the configuration register. Anyone remember the value? 0x2142. 42. The default is 0x2102. This is default. The top one is for password recovery. I'll just put PW right there. Make sure you stick that in your mind. That's pretty much the only thing you'll want to know off the top of your head about that configuration register. Now we're at step 4. And would you look at that? We're there. Now, I know I'm pulling right now from some of that prerequisite knowledge from the getting connected to Cisco devices. This is the prompt that you'll see when you first boot a router or switch and they have no configuration at all. So it looks like a blank device. I'll hit no. I don't want to enter the initial config dialog. You actually never want to go in the initial config dialog. It's loading. It's kind of powering on, if you will. Spits out a bunch of status messages, and we're there. We're at a blank router configuration prompt. There's literally, if I get in, and again, I'm still pulling from a lot of that prerequisite. I'm into privilege mode, and I type in show running configuration. This is all default. The host name is default. There's no IP addresses on any of the interfaces, but look at this. If I type in show startup configuration and hit the enter key, there is a host name. It's AZRTO1. This is the previous config. There is usernames and passwords on this device. There is IP addresses on this device. So the configuration is still there. It's just sitting in startup config, and it was ignored during the boot process. So what do? Well, I want to save my configuration. Password recovery shouldn't blow the configuration away. It should still save what was there. Just let me reset the password. So here's what I do. I'm going to type in the command, copy startup config to running config. That copies the quote-unquote bad configuration that I don't know the passwords on, right, into the running configuration. And you might go, well, isn't that a problem? Because you just restored the passwords that you don't know. True, but look at what mode I'm in. This is known as privilege mode, meaning when I type, and this is where I'm kind of trying to bridge the gap between that prerequisite knowledge. When I type in enable, there should be a password there. There should be a password to protect the console port. I didn't get any of those. I'm all the way to full admin, root level, whatever mode you want to call it, that I have full access to the device. So when I restore the configuration, I still have full access to the device. You can see the prompt has changed for the new host name that was copied over, but now I can go in to global configuration mode and reset the passwords. I can say, oh, the actual enable secret that I didn't know before, that's the password that protects the privilege mode, is actually Cisco. I'm going to reset it to the password being Cisco. I'm going to go under my console port, line console 0, and type in password Cisco. I'm resetting all the passwords to something that I know. Now, I save the configuration. Oh, man. I know this is so hard to bridge the gap between knowledge you may or may not have at this point and what you have to do to get into your device using password recovery. All of this stuff I talk about when I get into the basic connectivity and management of the iOS. So if it's confusing, please jump on over there. What I just did was restore my configuration and now save it with the new passwords in place that I typed in right here. Cool? There's one critical piece missing. We've recovered the configuration, reset the passwords, saved, check. Don't forget to do this. It's so easy to do in the excitement of everything. We need to come back here and revert the configuration register. I'm going to type in show version because that's where you can see the configuration register right there at the bottom. See it? Ta-da! It's still 2142, which means my router will be working, my switch will be working until it reboots, and then it's going to ignore the startup config again. It's going to be as if it lost all its configuration. And I may not remember that in the future, so it's so critical right now to remember to go in, configure terminal, type in config-register 0x2102. Back to the default, no longer reverting the startup config. I'm going to verify it by typing in that show version command again. And you can see right there, it says, by the way, the next time you reboot this device, it's going to go back to 2102, which will now remember the configuration. It will remember to look for the startup config with all the new passwords that I entered. And that is the process of recovering a password for a Cisco router or a switch. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.